Welcome to the Fear and Courage podcast, where we tell the stories of military veterans, law enforcement officers, and first responders. These careers are intense and in many ways foreign to the majority of people. We tell stories with intensity, dramatic personal impact, high physical and emotional stress, and lives change as a result of a career of service. Thanks for listening. Today on the podcast, I've got Sam Deen. Sam is a former Army captain and 2006 graduate of the United States Military Academy. He served as a rifle and then scout platoon leader in 3rd Brigade Infantry Division on their deployment to the Pech and Korengal River Valleys in 2008 and 2009. He owns and runs Crossfit Van Zandt and Crossfit Van Zandt South, as well as Zandt Coffee Co. and his real estate investment company in Canton, Texas. Sam is a candidate for United States Congress in the 5th District of Texas. Welcome to the show. It's nice to have you, to get you for a second for the podcast, considering you've been hot on the campaign trail lately.
Well, thanks for having me, Michael.
Yeah,
really appreciate what you're doing with this podcast. I've listened to an episode with Jimmy Howell, and he was one of my heroes, and it was great. So thanks for taking the time to hear my story and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just to, the listeners kind of heard the intro, and they'll get an idea who you are from that, but it's fair to give everybody a heads up, I guess, that we've known each other for quite a while, and it goes back to essentially day 1 or 2 at West Point. So what was, I didn't know you before that though, so what kind of went into the decision to join the military? Grew up in East Texas, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Canton, Texas, which is a small town of about 3,500 people. And, it's where I'm sitting right now, by the way. Like you, 9/11 happened when we were seniors in high school.
Yep.
And that was the huge, deciding factor on where not only did I want to go to school, but where I focused my attention and all of my efforts on getting accepted and getting the nomination by the congressman and actually making it to West Point. And, growing up here, I was an athlete. I played every sport, an Eagle Scout, which, once you got to West Point, everybody's an Eagle Scout.
Yeah, that surprised me that there's, I feel like, so I stopped Boy Scouts very young. I'm sure it was a fact. It was some kind of, wanted to play soccer instead or whatever was going on. But
gasoline or perfume is what we would call it. Cars or women. Because it wasn't really cool to be a Boy Scout as you got into your teenage years. But
yeah, and as you get older in that program, it actually becomes something that takes a real amount of your time because you have, your Eagle Scout project's a big thing. And we got to West Point, and I was like, man, 40% of our class is Eagle Scouts. It was crazy. Yeah. It's like 20% of the class was a valedictorian or salutatorian. 40% of the class was an Eagle Scout. Everybody's coming from varsity, like serious varsity athletics of some kind or another for the most part. And I was over there just feeling like a scrub, man.
Oh, no doubt. I went through, the whole application process was, a lot of people thought I was doing it in vain. Most people thought I would never make it and get in. And I could just read people that they were like, well, this guy, they're never going to accept this guy. So, he doesn't have a chance. But, as I got closer and closer, I think, football recruitment kind of helped me a little bit.
Sure.
Even though I didn't make the big team when I got there and I had to play sprint football because I lost so much weight, but I guess we'll get into that in a minute. But, I really wasn't supposed to be at West Point, and definitely not straight in because I didn't have the best grades, but man, I was motivated. So after 9/11 and sitting there and watching it on TV at Canton High School, I just was overcome with anger. And I knew then, like, I got to quit messing around and fooling around in high school and start studying hard to get my grades up, being involved in every sports team and trying to get a leadership role in that sports team to make sure my resume looked good. Finishing up the Eagle Scout deal, which I can't remember what timeline was on that, but I did it right before I was 18 years old. And, making sure everything was in order, because when my parents and I got to my congressman's office, there was 50 other kids out there trying to get that spot.
Yep.
And
it's one spot in many cases.
It's one spot. And I had an interview, and I guess I did well because I got the spot, and I got accepted, and I went straight in with the class of 2006, and we started Beast Barracks.
Yeah, and my experience with that was pretty similar, except that I went to my senatorial interviews first. I think it's somewhat regular knowledge for folks that are involved in it, but it's a little bit of a strange concept to other folks. It's and someone listening that has no experience with West Point or no exposure to that before, it's a completely different admissions process, because you apply to the school just like you apply to other colleges, and the school accepts you just like other colleges, except that that's just the first step. The getting notified that you're academically qualified to attend West Point makes you eligible for the congressional, senatorial, and vice presidential and presidential appointments. So, that first step, the thing that gets most other people, the process of getting into college for most colleges, is just the first step in the West Point application. And then you have to get an appointment from a congressman or a senator, and most congressmen and senators generally have between 4 and 6 cadets or midshipmen at each service academy at one time. So each year, a congressman or senator only has 1 or 2 appointment slots to give. And just like you said, there might be 50 people applying that year. And I went to my senatorial appointments and just did horribly. They asked me what qualities a leader should have, and I left out integrity. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Well, and I just thought I got to get my stuff together and get serious about this. But it sounds like you got essentially instant purpose when you saw the events of 9/11.
Yeah, and I just remembered that the first time I took the SAT, I scored on the Forrest Gump level. It was in the low 900s.
That is outside the range for West Point, my friend.
I took the SATs 5 times.
Wow.
And every time I got a little better. And then I was able to combine, I guess, the math from one test and the reading or the English from the other test, and piece together a score that they could live with and accept this guy just for effort alone, maybe. And and that may be a little foreshadowing for the rest of my career at West Point, but
figure it out by the seat of your pants and get it done.
Right. And so got in, and Beast Barracks was a.
So let's describe what that Beast Barracks looks like. Because it's kind of its own little version of basic training, but they've got a different purpose, right? Because Beast Barracks is not initial entry training. It's get you the knowledge that you need to be able to start developing as a cadet. So there are definitely some differences, but you lost a little bit of weight in Beast Barracks, didn't you?
Oh, absolutely. I think at least 20 pounds.
Wow.
And, up until this point, I've never ran over a mile in my life. I was a football player, so, I had, at the time, big muscles, and I could sprint a lot. I played linebacker, and when I got there, I remember failing the first Army 2-mile PT test, just for the lack of never running that long before, and.
Yeah, because you take that first Army PT test, 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, and a 2-mile run, and for brand new cadets, the standards of around a 15-30 2-mile run, 42 push-ups in 2 minutes, and 53 sit-ups in 2 minutes. Even though that doesn't sound particularly daunting to most people, if you don't do a lot of running, a 15.5-minute 2-mile is no small task. To us, we've had plenty of military experience and lots of fitness activity since then, but at the time, a 15.5-minute 2-mile wasn't exactly a guaranteed win when it comes to brand new cadets, and you only have 6 weeks to fix it if you fail it.
Right, and I passed with probably my best time ever. After just a little training on it. Yep. But and it's funny, the West Pointers that are listening to this, the West Point Sewage Plant was also along the 2-mile course. So it was right along the Hudson River, right by the train tracks. And I'll never forget, every time we ran a 2-mile PT test, you just had to breathe in the sewage fumes, and which it added another level of suck to the Army PT test. But,
for sure, it's its own unique little course because it's one sewage plant, but in 2 miles you pass it 3 times. And so it's not just one little trip past the horrible smelling sewage plant. It's 3 trips by, and you better get that 2 mile done quickly because it's not just a pass-fail. It determines part of your rank in the class. Because that's another thing is that your overall class rank is not just determined by academics. It's determined by all 3 of physical fitness, academics, and military training, and scores as well. So that's definitely a factor. But so and we were in the same beast squad.
Yeah, correct.
So we got that 6-week introduction, shoulder to shoulder, back in 2002.
Yeah, and I still remember being next to you in the mess hall in the table where we weren't allowed to talk. And we had to hold our hands out for, I guess, if we wanted seconds of whatever helping. And, of course, everybody did.
Oh, and,
starving. Everybody just wants that second carton of milk or that second whatever. And I definitely remember that. And the memorization of the plebe knowledge of, you name it.
Yeah, I mean, it was basically memorizing a 50-page book. It had more than 50 pages, but the amount of actual content we needed to memorize was about 50 pages of stuff. And the levels of success there were pretty highly varying. But I think that was at least my biggest up to that point, but really kind of my first real adult introduction to the concept of being comfortable, or being okay with just being uncomfortable, right? There's so much about the military isn't pain or struggle; it's discomfort.
Yeah, and it's learning how to fail, and being okay with failure, because you're going to correct it down the road. Every military school is going to, for the most part, it's going to break you down.
Yep.
And make you fail. I don't care who you are; you're going to fail, and then you're going to be built back up. And it's such a great lesson that everybody should have to go through that and experience that, because it unlocks your potential and it unlocks your drive to do great things down the road. And I'd love to talk about failures and just for example, that I'd have forgotten about that Army PT test that I failed, but that was that unlocked, that was nothing down the road for, because then we had to, fast forward a little bit, you had a Ranger PT test, and then now we're doing great things in CrossFit where we would never dream of failing a 2-mile run. But, without experiencing that failure, you don't really know how unfit you are.
Yeah. And it's such the being okay and willing to risk failure. Without that, the magnitude at which you can achieve success is severely diminished, right? You have to get out there and risk failure. Otherwise, your successes will be very small ones, or none at all. It's that willingness to accept risk of failure that's so important. And your first experience at West Point essentially was failure. You got that out of the way real quick.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I failed plenty of things there. And I went through West Point as a guy that wasn't supposed to be there. I had a kind of that chip on my shoulder that these people don't think I should be here, and so I basically had something to prove, and
sure.
was able to get through it, and that's been a lot, kind of a driving force for the rest of my life. And I wouldn't trade that experience for anything.
No,
West Point it wasn't the funnest place to go to college for sure. Oh my Lord, but what you learn there is incredible.
Yeah, and the peer group that you create there, kind of the old classic moniker of "show me your friends and I'll show you your future."
Yeah.
The peer group and kind of the cohort group that you develop there and the friendships there, because it is a trying environment, because you experience failures together, and as a result of the high level of intensity and focus, because everybody knows they're going into the active duty Army, and at that time especially, everyone knew they were going to war, and that provided so much intensity and focus for us that even though we definitely had our fun at every opportunity, given how few opportunities there were for away from West Point social activities, but we had our fun, and we acted like 18, 19, 20-year-old kids do, but there was an intensity and a focus that's hard to find elsewhere, and I think that really cemented relationships for the long term that I know personally have benefited me, for 15 years. Every
Absolutely.
day.
The military and the physical fitness wasn't, besides, getting through that first story we talked about, the military and the physical fitness afterwards came very easily to me, and I loved it. It's the reason I went. Whenever we got a hold of the academics, that was also the biggest challenge of me of getting through. And I started leaning on my friends to get, for tutoring, because there's some very brilliant people there. And, I could play guitar, so I was giving guitar lessons, and they were tutoring me almost every night at certain points to get my scores up to passing and to where I could move on to the next semester and things like that. But
and to clarify, these are friends helping you out because they're interested in your success. That simple.
Right.
These aren't paid tutors. These aren't provided by the school tutors. These is your buddy 4 doors down who's better at that than you are. And there's a constant sharing of information and trying, it's cooperate and graduate is said. I probably said that 1,000 times a year at West Point. Cooperate and graduate, because that's the only way you can.
Absolutely. And, shared adversity is what builds teams. And there's so much adversity there, just little, minute things, thinking about back to being a plebe or a freshman there, under the light of your desk lamp.
Describe that, the being a plebe and the little tasks, and then the wonderful experience of laundry duties together.
Okay. So if I could summarize what being a plebe was like, let's see. You're not allowed to talk outside your room, and you had to march everywhere, and that itself had its own challenges. But at nighttime, you had to turn the lights off at a certain time. I can't remember when.
I think it was 11:30 maybe.
Yep. But then you could turn your desk lamp on, so I'd be studying, shining my shoes, talking to Ashley, who's my wife, and then at the time my girlfriend, on the phone. And after that was done, I'd be memorizing. So, requirement at all times, you had to have 3 New York Times articles memorized where you could talk about at the table. You had to have 3 jokes, 3 pieces of trivia, and you had to memorize the meals, 3 meals in advance at all times, which really turned into 4 meals because they would ask you immediately what the next meal was during a meal. And that right there, helped me a lot with multitasking. And, today you'll still find me doing 1,000 things at once, and, not being an expert in any of those, but, being good enough to get by and to function with all these different tasks flown at me. And actually, it's very comfortable for me to do that because of that stuff, that training I went through there. I find comfort in a lot of different chaos and a lot of different requirements at once. It's just a comfortable place for me to be. And, that definitely reinforced it, doing those duties every day. And,
yeah. And I think that when you look at this from the outside, right, you have to memorize some news articles. You have to memorize a bunch of silly information or seemingly silly information about the school. Shining shoes, what does it matter if your shoes are pretty or not? But what it did is exactly what you described. It created shared adversity. I can't count the number of times I shined someone else's shoes or my shoes were shined by somebody else because we were splitting up tasks, splitting up tasks with your roommate to find deficiencies, splitting up tasks with the other plebes in your company. There's about 36 plebes per company. And of all the, the plebes, which is, I don't know if we've mentioned this yet, but the term for freshmen at West Point, with all of those people, all those activities within that company, at the time 32 companies at West Point, now 36, the company is kind of that insular unit. And so those 36 other freshmen, those 36 other plebes that you're with become that peer group that you share this adversity with. And through all those little seemingly silly tasks, having to keep your shoes shined, having to know the different things that you have to know. Laundry duties is a traditional service task that plebes do for all of the upperclassmen. The laundry is all sent out at West Point. The schedule's just so full that that there's genuinely no time to launder all of the uniforms correctly because there's wool uniforms and stuff that has to be dry cleaned, and there's literally no time at all to do that correctly. And so to keep cadets from destroying their uniforms, there's a laundry service. So everyone sends their laundry out once a week, and when it all comes back packaged neatly with names on them, ready to go, and that laundry has to be delivered to the rooms of the upperclassmen. All that is a opportunity for upperclassmen to create an environment of shared adversity for the freshmen, the plebes, the freshmen. And so delivering the laundry, as soon as you leave the designated plebe room that all the laundry is in, there are upperclassmen waiting to politely verify that you're up to speed on all of your information, your shoes are shined, your uniform's looking like it should. And I think that first night, to deliver maybe 100 bundles of laundry, it might have taken 5 hours.
Yeah.
And these delivery distances are no more than 100 meters at a time. I mean, we're talking in the same building.
Yeah. And, the fear,
so scared. So scared.
And it's really not, looking back, there's no reason for the fear, but what that was teaching us, I think, other than pressure and other things, is not being afraid to go up and speak with somebody, or knock on someone's door. That folks in powerful positions, for instance, like some of our instructors at West Point were colonels, and I remember General Shinseki was an instructor of one of our leadership classes. And, some people are paralyzed to go up and talk to people. And I've never had an issue going and speaking to, politicians or higher ranking bosses or things of that nature. And, it's just getting over that. And instead of being paralyzed of what can happen, I'm going to get griped out, or I'm going to get, made fun of, or I'm not going to be prepared enough for his questions or her questions.
Yep.
That right there, just a little courage to go out there and face, in this case, hazing, it got us ready for, communication and reporting.
Yeah. And I think there's two things going on there. So the first is, and we use the term hazing. That's such a hot button term. There's no physical contact. Nothing they did violated the Army's regulations. And when that did happen, when regulations were violated, it was dealt with appropriately. But there's two things that affects, I think. One is realizing that another person, no matter how intimidating, how important they might seem, or in the opposite direction, no matter, homeless bum, whatever it is, all of these other people, whether it's a general officer or a colonel or somebody you see on the street, it's just another person, right?
Right.
You learn quickly, General Shinseki, for his incredible accomplishments and incredible authority at periods in his career, is just a dude. At that, he, like, looking back on that, he was just a dude then. And that's an important thing to learn and learn early in the military, because not the inability to kind of look past all the fancy stuff and get down to business with other individuals will hurt you. You have to have that. And then I think the second part of it is public speaking, because how many times were you called out by an upperclassman, and had to perform on the spot with whatever they asked you to do, whether it was a physical task or, asking what's the definition of discipline, and you having to spout it off. Every time you had to spout off a piece of that information you were memorizing, that was public speaking. And there are people that are far more scared of public speaking than death. That's a real thing.
Yeah. And, that plus, the Thayer Method, which all our classes were designed around, where you had to present your work every day in front of the class, helped, so by the time we graduated, we had practiced our public speaking in every class and all these different opportunities and, leading soldiers and whatnot. But that made me so comfortable talking in front of other people that, of course I still get nervous sometimes, but never, I never shy away from addressing a group, because that was just reinforced so much there and done so well.
Yeah, and you referenced the Thayer Method, which I think is an important part of this, right? When it comes to preparing yourself prior to any major responsibility, because the Thayer Method at West Point is a method of instruction where cadets are responsible for their own learning, right? You have to study the material prior to attending class, figure it out on your own with your peers beforehand, and then once you get into the classroom, you'll obviously come up with roadblocks and questions along the way, but with your peers, you learn the material, and then you come into class, and the instructor is almost a consultant, They work through the issues you've run into, and so you get so much out of the way of the learning process early. You get through all the easy stuff on your own. So the only thing you touch in class is the hard stuff in that environment where it's public discussion, where you have to stand up in front of your classmates. That's a very different thing than the lecture method of instruction, and it does something different to the students as well.
Right. It makes you, you're not spoon-fed the material. So you have homework on the night before the first day of school. And think about it. You got the lesson online or from the syllabus from the teacher, and you have to teach yourself the lesson and then come up with the answers and then be able to present those answers on the first day of school. And you have to present, and then the teacher comes and tells you, how to correct it. But it's making you think about a problem and a solution prior to being spoon-fed or prior to being taught. And that right there is I think is an amazing way of teaching. And
the entire tone of academics goes from reactive to proactive in that environment, right? You go out and get the information first, then you go to class. Yes.
And then you figure out, where you stumbled, and it's the same the next day, that you're not at that class that you went to, you figure out exactly how to do it right. And see if you're, of course I never had it right.
Nope. But, you and me both, buddy.
I figured out how to do it right. And then, the next night was a whole new lesson that you knew basically nothing about, that you had to go back and critically think for yourself, how to do these.
And I mean, there were nights for anyone other than, a few people we might be able to name who probably never had any academic trouble. There are a few of those unicorns in our class, but for everyone, there were classes where you felt like you did everything wrong. Like Jimmy Howell mentioned chemistry and physics. My 84 average at West Point's physics program my 84 average is the most proud I am of any grade I've ever gotten in my life.
Yeah. Those were incredibly tough classes. I remember one of my instructors was a German lady, and some scientist from Germany, and I couldn't even understand what she was saying. And, I wasn't very good at chemistry at Canton High School, and then getting up there, it was like, man, okay, let's roll our sleeves up and get after this.
Yeah, the 101 classes don't really exist there. You jump right into focused material in every class. There's no core chemistry class and then chemistry class for the chemistry majors. Nope, all in the same group.
Yeah.
But so obviously academics were difficult more difficult for some than others in the case of myself and what you've described, but we both had success with the fitness side and the military side. I know for me, going to the field for the first time, really, that summer at Camp Buckner and learning infantry tactics and going into the field and realizing, I felt like I was at the bottom of the class during the academic year and immediately felt like I was at the top of the class once we got to the field. That was a huge factor for me in choosing to go infantry. What kind of went into that decision for you? Is choosing infantry as your first branch choice?
Yeah, Camp Buckner, that which is essentially AIT. I think
referencing the advanced individual training that guys who enlist as infantrymen get, like that specialty job training. Yeah,
that's where it really became fun. That's where you could actually have a little leadership role and make decisions and fight the bad guys with the blanks and go through. And I really started to enjoy myself militarily there. I knew I wanted to earn a Ranger tab when I was in high school because I wanted to go to Afghanistan, and that I was just getting going all the way to senior year at West Point and going to branch night. I was so relieved that I was able to get infantry. And was able to keep going on, my original goal.
Anyway. It seems like you had a little bit more focus a lot earlier than I did when it came to kind of knowing what you wanted to do in the Army and why you wanted to do it.
Yeah, and people, I remember one time I was thinking about armor because I thought Army tanks were pretty cool.
Tanks are awesome.
And you remember hearing this, that they say the infantry officer said, do you want to lead men or do you want to lead machines? And that always kind of stuck with me. He's like, no, I want to lead men. I want to have a team. And of course, the armored people have a team.
Yeah, I'm sure
too.
you've got some tankers foaming at the mouth right now, but
yeah. Sorry to all my tanker buddies out there, but I like hiking around with a backpack. I like shooting rifles. That's in my wheelhouse. And being an infantry officer was everything to me. And anyway, the whole men versus machines deal really sold me.
So I had a similar interaction where I was talking to an instructor about the difference between combat support, combat service support, and combat arms roles. And the instructor basically said, let me break it down to you. And this is a guy who's he's an infantry officer, and he had been a field grade officer in an infantry battalion already. This is a senior leader in the infantry, and he was my economics instructor, and so he was within my major as well. And so I saw him regularly, and he was a mentor for me with regard to my choice of the infantry. And what he said was, with some bias, obviously, but what he said was, when it comes down to operations, there are people who stand at the map and make decisions, and there are people who step up, brief their technical specialty, and then step back. And so you have to decide, and both jobs are highly, highly needed, highly technical. One job's not more or less important than the other, and all of those jobs have to be filled by incredibly competent people for the mission to be successful. But one job stands at the map, makes decisions, and leads the operation, and the other jobs step up to the map, brief their specialty, you know, whether it's communications or engineering or intelligence. They brief their specialty, and then they step back. And he said, you need to decide if you want to be the one at the map making decisions or the one who has a technical specialty that you brief that contributes to the mission. And that, for me, made the decision in an instant.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what does that look like, graduating from West Point and joining the infantry as a second lieutenant?
Yeah, you know, graduation was a huge accomplishment for me personally. And, you know, the president, George Bush, was giving our diplomas out, which was a big deal. And moving then, you know, of course, I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for 2 months for a training deal. But then getting to Fort Benning, Georgia, with all of my buddies, you know, like all of you guys, you know, we all went to West Point together. We all commissioned together. We all go to Fort Benning together. And that's where we learn, you know, the art. And the immense pressure. Now, okay, now you're an infantry officer. The next step is you must get a Ranger tab. And if you don't have one, you're going to be shunned or ridiculed when you get to your unit. And I know that everybody felt that pressure, and everyone's doing everything they can to make sure that they're prepared and they're ready. And then just having fun with, you know, at Fort Benning, being out in the field and doing real Army things, and actually finally being active duty in the United States Army. I know as a cadet, you're partially considered active duty, but you know, being a butter bar second lieutenant on an Army base and going through with all your buddies, and this is where really, you know, all of us really started having a lot of fun, because we've been in what a lot of people call prison for 4 years, which is West Point.
Well, I think for infantry guys too, so for an intelligence officer, the difference in specific activity, you know, what they find themselves doing day in and day out, is a little bit more academic, right? And as an infantry guy, what you do for your job operationally, I think that's the most different of any of the branches from an academic environment. I think that's an accurate assessment, having, you know, not spent any time in other branches. But I believe the infantry's the farthest from the classroom, right? And so if you're an infantry officer and that's been your mentality the entire time, it almost feels like getting set free. Yeah.
No more books and studying, even though there's still plenty of that. But
what, you know, the books we were studying were field manuals.
Let's go out in the woods and figure out how to attack enemy and how to, you know, do our battle drills, and let's get in good shape, which most of us already were, and let's focus on doing what we came here to do. Or we graduated college now, but we really came here to do this all along. So let's focus on what we actually came here to do.
Yeah, and so initial entry training for infantry officers is essentially training within your specialty, and that was about 15 weeks of basically learning how to be an infantry officer. You go out into the field. It's about 1 week in the classroom and then 1 week in the field all the way through, and you learn the basics of battle drills from the leader's perspective. You know, the nuts and bolts of being in the infantry: attack, ambush, raid, defense, digging fighting positions and how you construct fighting positions, patrol bases, you know, how units set up defensive perimeters when they have to stop and sleep and clean weapons and things. You learn all of those and how to lead tactically in an environment when you're in charge of 40 soldiers. And then comes Ranger School. And Ranger School is a very unique dynamic for young infantry officers because, like you said, especially at that time, there was a feeling that if you did not achieve that Ranger qualification, you would not be placed in a platoon leader position, especially not immediately when arriving at your unit. And for us, all with a deployment to Afghanistan on the horizon, and really that deployment to Afghanistan signified the whole reason we joined the military in the first place. You know, that's where the bad guys came from that caused what we saw on 9/11. We were only a few years after 9/11 at this point. And so we saw this Afghanistan deployment, and the idea of not being able to participate fully was terrifying.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And, you know, just having that goal of getting there and knowing that if you weren't ready and you didn't earn this Ranger tab, that it might be a career ender, which we know now that, you know, and I listened to Jimmy Howell's podcast with you and talk about some really great officers that didn't have them initially. That's possible, but it just made it a heck of a lot harder if you didn't graduate. And, you know, once you earn that Ranger tab, and we can talk about Ranger School here in a minute, but once I earned it, I felt just as happy and accomplished earning that than I did getting my diploma from West Point. I mean, and relieved, all the same.
It kind of signified that you'd arrived as an infantry officer, right? Didn't have a whole lot of experience yet, none in a real unit, no combat experience, but you've done a couple of things that were hard enough to give you the credibility to at least take the job.
That you had done at least something that most people haven't done.
Yep.
You know, and it just made you merely qualified to be an infantry officer, really. Yep. And it was a huge relief. It's like, you know, it's like passing your driver's test, getting a driver's license, you know, or something like that. But a big deal for us. And, you know, I remember Ranger School, the start of that, you know, 3 a.m, we're out there. I can't remember what they call Ranger School out there.
At Camp Darby?
Camp Darby out there. In our Army PTs, 3 a.m, it's raining, and we're getting lined up basically to start the Ranger PT test, which is a difference from the Army PT test. In this case, there's a 5-mile run in under 40 minutes, which, you know, that stressed me out. I couldn't help but think about the West PT test. And, you know, now I've got to not only run more than 2 miles, now I got to run 5 in under 40, which, man, I'd been training my butt off because I knew this was coming. And, of course, a lot of people washed out on that first morning from that PT test.
Probably about 25% of the class on day one is gone. And that's either, you know, recycled to redo the PT test or you know, whatever it is. But I felt like 25% of the class had some kind of issue on that first day. And so your trepidation was definitely valid. But, you know, that school, the Ranger qualification, it's a leadership school. You know, it's a leadership school in a tactical environment, but at its core, it's a leadership school. And it's the difference between the 75th Ranger Regiment, which is a special operations unit where the Ranger qualification is a requirement for all leaders, versus just the Ranger qualification, which is kind of the symbol that you've been through the tough experience and that you have the benefit of the leadership development that comes with that course. And so, you know, to give an idea of the structure, we've talked a little bit about this in the past, but we haven't really gotten into it on the podcast yet. Ranger School is a 62, it varies a little bit, but around 60 to 64 day course. And it's designed as a 3-phase course. The first phase is at Fort Benning, and that's split between their little introductory area, which it's not Darby, I can't remember what it's called, and then you move out to Darby for the field portion. And then you go up to outside of Dahlonega, Georgia, in the North Georgia mountains for the mountain phase as the second phase, and then down to Eglin Air Force Base, Florida, for the swamp phase. And so those 3 phases, there's an academic portion, short academic portion at the beginning to get everybody on the same page tactically, or at least attempt to. Then you go to the field and you rotate leadership positions. You have to get a go in at least one leadership position per phase to graduate. And they recycle people phase by phase or all the way back on to day one, or they drop them from the course, kind of depending on the infraction. So that's the framework, but I'd say that little 60-second description doesn't really get into the real experience, you know.
Yeah, you couple that with there's no rank, so it's just your name. So you're broken down to there's anything you've done prior to that doesn't matter. What matters now is how do you lead your peers on successful missions without food and without sleep, and how well can you do your job without food and without sleep and that's with no other authority other than the respect that you have for working for them when it's their turn.
Yeah, absolutely. Something Jimmy Howell said on the last episode is, you get your go if your buddies want you to get your go. Everybody works for everybody else. And that's more of the shared adversity. That theme that continues to creep back up is shared adversity, shared adversity, shared adversity, and the development that results from repeated exposure to that. I lost 25 pounds in Ranger School. 25, 30 pounds is completely average, consistent across the board. It's 2 meals a day and all day long with a heavy backpack on, walking, mile after mile through the hills or whatever it is, and very little sleep, and either, depending on when you go to Ranger School, either extreme hot or extreme cold.
Yeah, we went in January, so extreme cold through most of it, and I remember I remember the sun hitting my face when we got to Florida, and I thought I was in heaven. I literally thought I walked through the pearly gates, and that was probably definitely hallucinating.
Did you have do you have any of those weird experiences that people report? Because you get to the point where people legitimately hallucinate, they pass out, they're asleep and walking at the same time.
Yeah. Well, personally, I saw you pass out. We had a fire. We were able to get a fire every once in a while when we finish a bunch of things, just to just
in the first phase.
Nobody had hypothermia, but I saw you pass out and fall right into the fire. So fall asleep standing up and fall right into the fire, and I had to roll you out of there. And I'll never forget that.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was, but somebody in our squad. We're hungry and it's night. You're looking through night vision goggles and everything seems to start moving around. And one guy goes up and thinks he sees a Snickers bar on the ground, and he goes and grabs it. He doesn't want the RI to see it, so he puts it down in his T-shirt. And when we get to the patrol base or whatever, he goes to grab it out, and it's just a big old pile of leaves. He just hallucinated that. But when you say 2 meals a day, you're being generous. They give you an MRE and say, go ahead and eat, and you'd start just ripping it open and eating it. And then a couple of minutes later, they'd say throw it away. And if you hadn't finished the whole thing, you quickly learn just to shovel it down.
I feel like 7 or 8 minutes is what I remember from that. It's like 7 or 8 minutes to eat an MRE each time.
And I remember at one point when we were allowed to, on the maybe mountain phase or Florida phase, when we were allowed to kind of take a little more time, a guy low crawling over to my position and saying, "Hey, do you mind? Can I lick that wrapper?" Because he'd obviously seen me not lick a certain wrapper, and he'd been watching me. And of course I said, "No, you cannot." And I opened it and started licking it myself. And,
calories count in a way there, at least subjectively, that you don't really think about food like that ever again. I ate the coffee creamer packets in every MRE straight. I ate the sugar packets in every MRE straight. I was quite literally starving.
In mountain phase, we had the baby pine trees. And somebody at some point said, "Sam, these pine needles have vitamin C in them." And I don't know if it was God talking to me or somebody. But I started eating these pine needles, and that's what got me through mountain phase nutritionally. And it's funny that after graduating, Ashley and I were on a hike or something, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to try some of those pine needles. And I gagged.
Oh, it's horrible.
I gagged,
But they were so delicious at the time.
Yeah, Ashley still has letters, from my food fantasies. I would write her letters on a green Army notepad, and it would be like, how you doing? I love you so much, yada yada yada. And then it would get into, listen, when I get out of this thing, we're going to go to Cold Stone Creamery, and I'm going to get a base of cake batter ice cream. And then I can still remember the entire thing. There's Reese's involved, strawberries involved, and all of these things, and I would list it out. And she knew I was going crazy because she still has all these, and they're hysterical to read. But I remember low crawling myself across a patrol base one night to go over to one of my friends and say, "Hey, man," and I pulled my notebook out and I said, "Tell me about that ice cream again," because I was so focused on it, and I wanted to write down exactly what he had told me at another juncture about what type of ice cream he was going to get. So I wanted to make sure I had this listed to a T, so I could get that exact same ice cream combination when I got out. And that's just kind of some of the wacky stuff.
The thought of like you're so focused on food because you had so little of it that the thought of missing out on information about food that could possibly benefit you in the future was painful. Yeah. You had to get that information.
And that's where you got pleasure, was fantasizing about food. And it's like Peter Pan or whatever, the Lost Boys have that made up imaginary meal. It's so good, and that's what I would fantasize about, and it would help you kind of pass the time, sitting there pulling security during a patrol. But
yeah, I know I hallucinated. There was a white spot on a tree that I thought was someone's face, and I talked to a tree for about an hour, I believe, pulling security. I talked to a tree for an entire hour, long conversation. Did a podcast with a tree in the woods, and then the time I obviously fell into the fire wasn't the best situation in the world, but the number of times I fell down from falling asleep standing up, and I had this horrible habit of putting my rucksack right in front of my feet, and so I would fall asleep, and your knees kind of buckle, and a lot of the time you can catch yourself on the way down and you don't fall all the way down. But by standing right behind my rucksack, it was just kind of how I took it off. That's where it landed, is right in front of my feet. I would fall asleep standing up, and my rucksack would prevent my knees from buckling effectively so I could catch myself. And so maybe 25 times or more, I fell asleep standing up, and the first thing to hit the frozen ground was my face. Over and over and over. And the terrible situation I was in mentally, from starving and being cold and no sleep, I didn't even realize that my rucksack on the ground in front of me is why I fell on my face and not my knees like everyone else. Yeah.
And remember, everything was tied off to your rucksack with parachute cord, with 550 cord. So whenever you did fall,
some personal responsibility training there.
It was a spider web of, everything was on a leash just because they knew that you would lose everything. Yeah. And that was a fun deal.
I'm sure the Ranger instructors felt like they were babysitting toddlers many, many times, because we were pretty useless when it came to making sound decisions out there in the woods.
But here's the real deal. You're in a leadership position, and you have to pay attention, because at any time you could be pulled to be in this leadership position, and there's 5 or 7 spots that you could be in charge of when they decided to switch leadership. So you had to know the plan, and you had to be able to execute the plan. But whenever you are doing a mission, and say one of your friends is in charge, if you fall asleep during his mission and sabotage his mission, whether it was intentional or not, that you're going to be in leadership position, and what's he going to do now that you've messed his up? So you're on constant guard to make sure your friends had successful missions. So whenever you were in charge, that you had a successful mission, and they would work for you as well. And it helped you be a good follower. It helped you be a great leader. And sometimes, literally, everybody was so tired and so hungry that you had to almost ensure it by going from guy to guy and punching them in the ribs to keep them awake. And funny thing is, I did the same thing in Afghanistan on a 1 or 2 missions at night, where my guys would doze off because we were, it was so hot and we were walking all day. But man, it is the best leadership school in the country, and I'll stand by that statement all day long.
Yeah, it was an incredibly difficult thing to go through, but I value that experience developmentally almost more than anything else I've gone through. But so after after Ranger School, you're qualified to do the job, basically. And so what was your first kind of post and duty station? This is something a large group of us went to, but can you describe what that was like, moving out to Fort Hood and getting ready for that first deployment?
Yeah, so this is a whole new experience for us. Now we get to actually meet our soldiers, people we've looked forward to this for a long time now. And of course, Ashley and I got married on the 30 days off that we had to move from Fort Benning to Fort Hood, and arriving in Canton, Texas, which I joke all the time that, the Army showed me the world, man. Fort Benning, Georgia, Fort Hood, Texas.
Yeah, I got a little bit more of the traditional worldwide experience than you did. You went to New York for college, Fort Benning, Georgia, in the woods in the middle of nowhere in Georgia to learn how to be an infantry officer, and then right back home to be an infantry officer, basically.
Yeah, and Killeen's not the nicest town, but going down there and meeting, and sorry, my dog's in the background.
No, that's okay.
Hey, Murphy, can you keep it down? We're doing a podcast, buddy. So meeting my platoon sergeant for the first time and the soldiers for the first time was a, it was a great experience. We had a bunch of great guys. Of course, it was at the beginning we stood up our unit and we had a lot of, I would say some disciplinary issues going on. And I remember we had some drug issues that we had to deal with and get some guys, kicked out. But now you're kind of in charge of the training, and we knew we had a year to get ready for Afghanistan. Initially, it was going to be Iraq, and then they changed our orders for Afghanistan. And I remember my brother bringing me a GQ magazine article talking about, the Valley of Death, Korengal Valley, and Kunar Province, and it was an article on the 173rd, the unit we were going to replace. And I was like, man, Luke, we're not going to be going there. We'll be going to some big base, and fighting won't be that bad, and things of that nature. And of course, you and I went directly there to that exact place. And anyway, that whole year at getting ready at Fort Hood was, okay, Fort Hood is flat. We're going to the mountains. Let's do everything we can to get our legs in shape and train our guys to fight. So,
yeah, it was another moment of intense, focused training where it didn't take a lot of effort to get serious about what we were doing.
Yeah.
It was, we saw the deployment on the horizon. We knew where we were going at that point, and it was a very public place. We talked a little bit about this with Jimmy Howell as well, but the place we were going was daunting, and we felt the need to really push to prepare for that deployment. So, there was a lot of training opportunity in that year at Fort Hood prior to that deployment, and at one point you took over the scout platoon prior to going to Afghanistan, right?
Yeah, somehow.
What does a scout platoon in the Army do?
So, basically reconnaissance for the battalion, and it's the elite platoon in a light infantry battalion, and it involves 4 different sections or squads, if you will, with snipers, and basically on missions we would go out the night prior under the cover of darkness and set up an overwatch position on an objective, and then a conventional platoon would come and search an objective, and then they would leave, and then we would leave the next night or something of that nature. And I became the battalion commander, Colonel Jenkinson, put me in charge of that scout platoon months before we deployed. And he also sent me right back to Fort Benning to go to reconnaissance school, which was a great experience, with really fun school, doing a lot of the cool things that you thought you were going to do in Ranger School, but you never really did. And I trained up with that, and then I got back to Fort Hood, and it was days later that we got on the airplane and went over to Afghanistan. But you know, we talked about this, I think, privately before this podcast, but every person in 126 Infantry that went to Afghanistan with us, they're all heroes of mine. I can't explain what very well on the things that I saw, but I saw in immense bravery and selflessness for an entire year in Afghanistan. I saw some guys, regular guys, do the most incredible things. And when I think about it, I get emotional, because if you couldn't see it, you wouldn't even believe it. And you know, it was a trying year for everybody involved, and I know everyone is still thinking about it, because I do. And
it was a very unique environment, even among deployed battalions, because of how kinetic and how dangerous the area was, and then the resulting action on the part of U.S. soldiers, to meet that threat, was pretty astonishing in many cases.
Yeah, you take regular guys, and you take any high school football team, and you look at these people, and some guys are of course older, but I mean, you got all shapes and sizes, all ethnic backgrounds, from all over the world, from all over the United States, and put them in, train them up as soldiers, and then a lot of guys back at Fort Hood were troublemakers and whatnot, and they were always a pain in your butt. Put them over in Afghanistan in a combat, and they were some of the best guys and the people that you trusted with your life. And that experience, man, is like no other. And I remember arriving at Camp Blessing, and I don't know if you were with me at that point, but getting over in Camp Blessing, and this is days after Why Not, and the mortar rounds coming in, you're like, okay, now I'm in the fight, and you knew it was going to be kind of a long year, like right off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, my first experience in Afghanistan, I landed in our battalion area of operations. I guess my first experience getting into an area of operations in Afghanistan, landed in Korengal province, and the first day I landed in Korengal province, I was shot at walking off the back ramp of the CH-47 Chinook helicopter. So The first day, the first minute, the first 10 seconds I arrived there, the helicopter was getting hit by bullets as I was walking off the back ramp. It was an immediate introduction to what was pretty telling for the rest of that year.
Yeah, and that that's the enemy's MO in that fight is, welcome the new soldiers coming in, and also try to give a good send off to the soldiers going out. And with an insurgency, you're on the enemy's timeline, which there is no timeline for them. It's only fight when you want to, and claim victory for every battle, because that we can't stay out somewhere for very long, and we eventually have to go back to the base. And then as we leave, that's when they're going to attack. But yeah, it's just like that for me. And moving to the first big CONOP or combined operation, I think it was Operation Devil Stomp or Devil Sweep, because we did the same operation twice in the Dewagal Valley after Giordano was killed, one of the engineers from the IED. I remember being at Fob Fortress with my team, and Major Clark coming out and saying, "Well, the birds are coming in," and I remember saying that, "Hey, man," or "Sir, it's not night yet." And he's like, "Well, the birds are here now, and they're not going to stay very long, so you got to go now." And we get the team on, and we go to the valley, and they're going to drop us on top of the mountain. And you can hear a helicopter from miles away and see it. And it's not even dark yet, and we have to get off, and everybody in the world knows we're there. And I remember opening the doors and seeing the mountain, and that was my first real mission to where, boots on the ground off this helicopter. I'm in charge. I'm the ground commander at this point. And the team gets off, and we have to move down to our overwatch position, which is, through the mountains, takes forever to get to, even though it was probably, 500 meters away from the insertion. And my heart was beating through my chest. And I was like, well, somebody could come out from behind that rock with an RPG and just shoot it right into their helicopter and take us all out. But luckily, that didn't happen. We got off and got all of our stuff. Everybody got set up. We got in a defensive perimeter, and then we started to move out. We came across some local security guards. What was it? ASG was their name, I believe.
Yeah, I think that was just an acronym to talk about just generally employed security guards there, right? Like, I think that acronym stands for Afghan Security Guard. Right.
And so I remember these two guys locking eyes with these two guys as I'm approaching, and I'm ready to shoot them both. And because I don't know what they're going to react to us like. And, I do some hand and arm signals, and okay, we know these guys are friendly. And one of my, we had a little attachment, a guy from a line company attached to us, and he had an M1A, designated squad marksman rifle, which was the 308 version or 7.62 version of the M1A Scout. And his rifle was jammed because he had taken rounds from a 240 belt and used them in his rifle instead of the proper rounds. And I actually used one of these
same caliber, different bang.
Yeah, they would jam up and or get lodged in the chamber. And this kid probably didn't have the best weapons maintenance routine in the world. But I used one of these ASGs, one of the cleaning rods off his AK-47 to unjam his rifle, and so we could go ahead with the mission. And we're sitting there on this little ASG fighting position, and then the ASG guard stands up and starts screaming. And you can hear this throughout the whole valley. And I don't know, and you look at panic on some of my guys' face, like, what the hell is going on here? And of course, we find out soon it's the call to prayer, but I don't know if he's initially you're thinking he's yelling like the Americans are here,
sure,
or, whatever. And man, that's just you're on edge because of your first big mission that happens, and you're okay. After that, now everything's okay. And then we finally move down to our Overwatch position where we can have eyes on the route and set in, and that's where we get into a little defensive perimeter. So we have rear security, we have 360-degree security, and still got weapons trained on the because the next morning the route clearance package is going to come in and clear the route for
sure.
roadside bombs.
Yeah. So all this entire operation is just to get you into a position where you can see the road from a good fighting position, so that if something happens to those folks clearing the route, you can do something about it. You can help them out, and you get to see the route before they drive down it. So you can tell them no one's been in this section of the road for the last 24 hours or whatever it is. But all of that was just to get to a point where you could see the road, so that the main effort for that mission could do their job. Right, and you're out. You're very there was OP Saray, which was deep into that valley, but you're kind of you're out there by yourself. We had a 6-man team with me, and I believe my platoon sergeant Kim had a 6 or 7-man team on another hilltop. And so now we're out here, and now we're just watching and waiting. And this is where I reflected back to Ranger School.
that night, everybody's exhausted. I mean, it's hot. You're sweating. A lot of guys are too nervous to eat. So on that mission, now I'm crawling around to all my guys and making sure they're still awake. Some guys are dozing off, and I'm punching them right in the ribs, saying, if you want to fall asleep, somebody's going to come up here and slit your throat, and it's going to kill everybody else. So make sure you don't fall asleep again. And of course, my guys were awesome, but it can happen to anybody, just like you falling asleep and falling into that fire. So it takes a leader on the ground to make sure the team, functions and does the job. And that mission, the day came. On the first mission, I don't believe anything happened. They cleared the route. We exfilled. Then we did the same mission again, and we took contact. Somebody ambushed or shot at the route clearance package. We shot at them. So somebody was hit from the route clearance package. We had a private from the route clearance package shoot a 50 cal machine gun at our position, which almost destroyed us. RPG came over our heads, within feet of hitting our position and blew up behind us. And we got to call in close air support with the Kiowa Warriors, and enemy broke contact. I don't know. It was hard in Afghanistan in the mountains to do to figure out if you actually had enemy KIA or not because of the terrain,
Yep.
And very rarely did you actually see the enemy, but you would see muzzle flash, and you would focus your fire there, and then you would have helicopters looking around for movement, and using some thermals and whatnot. But after the mission was over, I remember that the enemy were kind of in between me and the pickup zone, which was we had to climb back up the mountain, and being a little nervous that they were going to set up another ambush for the Chinook that was going to pick us up, and it turns out didn't happen, and we were able to get out. But through I'm running for Congress right now, and I had an endorsement from a Medal of Honor winner, Michael Thornton, who was a Navy SEAL in the Vietnam, and I was asking him some questions and about his first firefight, his first mission, and the things that went through his head. Of course, he's an incredible warrior and badass, and he probably was never truly scared, but
he might tell you differently.
I remember whenever the first bullet started flying at me and at my guys, that I was overcome with I felt like a parent, because I was so obsessed or so fearful that one of my guys were going to get hit by a bullet. It was like somebody shooting at your kids, and you're sitting there holding them, and you're constantly checking, is everybody okay, and going around and making sure nobody's hit. And above that, I started stacking rocks in front of my position, and I laid out my GPS, I laid out my compass, I had my radio, and I was ready to call in that air support or the artillery, because that's kind of my job, and that feeling of, man, I think I'm okay, but I'm so scared that one of my guys are going to get hit, and that's it's like feeling being the commander on the ground is it's like a parent role, man, and of course that goes away and you get more efficient at what you do. But my hands were shaking, heart was beating through my chest, incredible amounts of adrenaline were coursing through my veins, and just to make sure I was doing everything right. At the same time, half my brain's thinking about my guys and are they okay, and everybody was fine.
Yeah, that's how you manage. The title of the podcast is Fear and Courage, and how you manage fear in that situation is interesting, because it's almost never fear for yourself, right?
Right.
It's a weird thing to try and figure out, because it's scary, right? I think you get at least in my experience, I found that I was scared about things that were unknown, right? Far before they happened. I remember sitting in my apartment at Fort Hood. You know, my wife at the time, I guess she was my wife by then. She's still my wife. Kristen she came out and visited. She was in grad school and stayed for a couple of weeks before the deployment, and she left because it was, it was like the day before we were going to fly out. And I remember sitting in my apartment, the cable had already been turned off. We basically shut it down and turned the apartment into a storage unit for a year. But I was sitting there thinking that I was just so scared because I didn't know what to expect. But once you get into it, that fear completely changes. It goes from fear of the unknown to fear of messing up and having one of your guys get hurt as a result. I think that was the overwhelming feeling is I wasn't scared of the enemy. I was scared of doing something that would give the enemy an advantage over one of my soldiers, or failing to do something.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's where you gain the courage from, that's right. How you can think, okay, we're in the back of this helicopter. As soon as I step out of this, I'm in enemy territory with only 6, 10, 12 guys, whatever it is, in a really rough and dangerous situation. And so there's fear and trepidation naturally of stepping out of that helicopter. But if you don't step out of that helicopter and do your job, your greater fear is going to be realized, which is the fear of letting down your soldiers.
Right. And what job what your job entails. It's being the leader. It's okay. You have to go through, or what happens if somebody does get hit? Who's calling in the 9-line medevac? If we get pinned down, you got to call in the artillery or the helicopters. You've got to position your guys to move and to maneuver based on where the enemy hits you from. And of course, in the mountains, when you get shot at, and this happened to me in the Korengal, when a sniper was shooting at us, you don't really know where it's coming from because the sound comes from all angles because of the valleys and the weird landscape. So, initially, this one time from Restrepo, we went down and to do an overwatch. I think Glenn Berkey's platoon was going to come down and go. It was either a healer engagement or they were going to go clear a house in one of the villages down below. And we go out the night prior. And this also, I want to talk about Captain Bobby Dranick with this mission as well. But I can't believe it was this mission or not. Let me talk about him for a minute. He was my company commander, one of the best leaders I've ever had, because some missions he would go with me, and being the great boss that he would go and just to be a rifleman and be rear security. And he would let me make the decisions, and he was doing that as being supportive of one of his guys. And I can't even begin to explain some of the leadership lessons he taught me on, how to take care of your people and how to give them their own confidence when you're around them when they're doing their job. But he did exactly that on a lot of these missions. But on this one particular one, we were taking fire from a sniper. So we went in the night before, nothing happened. Berkey went down, cleared the village, nothing happened. They returned to base. Now we're going to leave. And that's when we get hit with a sniper. And one of my snipers, Matthew Spencer and Zach Reese, were up on a rock with their rifles. And Spencer had the Barrett 50 cal. And the enemy sniper shot right by the rifle. And he scrambled down the rock and looked at me right in the eyes. And I was like, well, what are you doing, Matthew? Go back up there and get on your rifle. And he went back up and they shot the rifle again and right by it. So he finally grabbed it. But the whole time I'm thinking, where's this guy at? Where's this coming from? Because we've got cover on one side, but our backs are kind of exposed. And of course we had Restrepo behind us and kind of up to the west.
Yeah, and the fire from this sniper is coming in so accurately that it literally
Yeah,
put your sniper off his gun.
yeah,
It suppressed him
it's
to the point where he had to scramble away from his rifle because the rounds were coming in so close to him.
yeah, and the Barrett 50 cal is not a
Big
light
gun.
rifle. It's hard to move around, and he had it dialed in, and so now I've said, okay, does anybody see where that came from? And I move up the berm to see where it came from, and this is when this guy shoots again, and he shoots, and it hits the berm, and it covers my face with sand. So from the round, but I saw where that muzzle flash came from, and it was a place called the lumber yard, or the lumber mill that we called it, which was good because that was already a target reference point for mortars that we had. And anyway, one of my guys, Ezra Dawson, I instructed my guys to keep that guy's head down and keep him in place by returning fire. Richard Dial had a 240. He was my radio guy, but he carried a 240, and I carried the radio. And they pinned him down, and I was able to get 60 millimeter mortar from Restrepo on top of it, and then we were able to leave, and nobody got hit. But sometimes I think about that mission and that round coming in. And my brain itches from that round, because it an inch up it would have been a different story,
A couple inches away from going right between your eyes.
Yeah, and but that's just one of those deals. And
really what drives you to stick your head up when you're being suppressed by a sniper is exactly what we talked about a minute ago. It's the concern of, you got to do something about this guy, or he's going to shoot one of your soldiers.
Yeah, and we've got to do something. And we were already supposed to leave. When it got night, it was almost night, and what do we have to do to get everybody off here alive and get back? And that's what happened. And
yeah, there's quite a few incredible moments like that where I witnessed people do things that looked impossible. Just impossibly difficult tasks, or impossible physical exertions, or unbelievable amount of courage in the face of danger to get stuff done. And you ask them why after the fact, and basically the consistent answer you get is a confused look from them, and then say, that thing just needed doing.
Yeah, one time at Restrepo, we're sitting there and we get an attack, and very accurate fires coming in again from pretty much the same area, but we don't really know where it's coming in from. And I don't remember the name of the anti-sniper devices that we had that would tell us kind of direction and distance.
Boomerang, I think.
But it was, at one point it said 50 meters, and I don't know how accurate that was, but we're getting fire in, and we're lobbing hand grenades over the wall. And we're taking heavy fire from a support by fire position inside Restrepo, and I see the dirt pop up and everything. And our 60 millimeter mortar guy was inside the mortar pit trying to hold the mortar tube and fire the round, hold it himself and fire the round up. And I see Zachary Reese drop his sniper rifle and go sprinting across the open area, and sliding like he's sliding into home plate in that mortar pit, and just sits there and holds the mortar. And there's rounds coming in all around. And, the firefight lasts for, it was kind of typical to take fire like that. It lasts for what seemed, 20 minutes or something of that nature, probably less, or maybe more. I can't remember. But that's burned into my mind. Just the bravery, the brave acts like that I could never just believe that happened. And I have so much respect for my soldiers and my commanders too there, that they, day in and day out would do things like this without second thought.
Yeah, it's you almost get caught up in the greatness you see around you. People doing incredible things on a daily basis in an environment like that. It's pretty astonishing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean that, and that happened over and over and over again. And there were professional challenges in there too, because you're in the fight, but you're leading soldiers. You're dealing with a human resources system. These are people that they get paid a salary, and so you have all of the requirements of being a leader in an organization from an administrative standpoint, as well as the fact that you're there to fight a war, and there's no shortage of motivation to get all of that stuff done and do it well when you see unbelievable acts of selflessness and courage on a regular basis like that. There's you don't feel the need to procrastinate very often when you have that around you.
Right, and it's just pretty incredible that, and of course, two of my guys were killed, and Sergeant Christopher Rogers and Sergeant Ezra Dawson were both killed there. Chris was killed with an IED, early on in the deployment on the Korengal Road, and I wasn't present, and because he was on the security of the leadership security deal, because all four of my squads got tasked out to companies, which was the right thing to do. Didn't like it, but and I would go around and go on missions with each. And Ezra was killed when I was actually in January. I was actually home on my 2 weeks leave, my vacation, my R&R, and I was down in Austin, Texas with Ashley and my brother and his wife. And Sergeant Kim called me and told me that Ezra's helicopter had been shot down leaving the Korengal outpost with an RPG, and it crashed, and he died in there. And I think about those guys every single day. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about them. And of course, we lost quite a few other guys in our unit, and the sacrifice of Americans in these wars should never be taken lightly. And I remember coming to a realization on a mountain in Afghanistan that when we get back from this, that no one should ever infringe on our freedoms as American citizens because of the sacrifice and the job that our guys have been doing. And I try to sum it up for my guys on the way home, saying that, or when we got back to Fort Hood, because guys are dealing with some weird stuff when we got home, and saying that, guys, we spent a year in Afghanistan fighting. Of course, we didn't find Bin Laden. Bin Laden's still alive at this point. We've lost some of our friends, but for the rest of your life, you will be able to say that you've done something, and nobody can take what you've done away from you. And whatever bad experiences we had over there, the fact that you've served and fought for our freedom and fought against enemies of our country, people trying to kill us, nobody will ever take that away from you, and be proud of what you did. And unfortunately, we still deal with some with veteran suicide and veterans trying to find their place in the world, after being a soldier. And we as a nation, we cannot forget these dudes, and we have to do everything we can to help our warriors and help our men and women that are still in uniform, because the country asks so much of our military families, and it should never be taken lightly.
Yeah, I think of John Penich every single day, and the feeling I get when I think about him losing his life in service to our country, and the people that I knew personally, soldiers of mine that were killed, people that I put hours and hours of effort and development into, and whose life was cut short in service, I can't mess this up. This opportunity I've been given, this opportunity to go out and work and live in the environment I work and live in, have a family, and be able to do the things that I'm able to do. I had better not screw this up, because the idea of not living in a way that justifies their sacrifice is terrifying to me. That's the thing that will cause real regret at the end of my life, is if I don't live in a way that justifies that sacrifice. That's messing it up. That's screwing it up. And that's what I take from that experience, is that with that level of commitment and service and sacrifice, it would be a tragedy to get it wrong, what they fought for us to have, and what people continue to fight. Because the theory of, is each individual firefight in Afghanistan resulting in Americans being more free? You can get into the semantics with that, but these guys volunteered and sacrificed for their country, for an ideal that our country stands for. And so taking, political and foreign policy decisions out of it, look at the sacrifice, the service, the commitment. And to me, that drives me to live in a way that justifies that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't have said that better myself. And, I remember towards the end of our deployment, some of our guys are already back, and I'm down in Asadabad with my team, and we're packing up to leave. And Bobby calls me and says, "We need you to go take a guy and go back out to Korengal, because there's one, there's reports of a big attack. They're going to try to overrun something, kind of like Why Not happened whenever we showed up." And I looked at, Salim, my interpreter, and he didn't want to go. And a couple of my guys were looking down, and I remember Bobby Dean Hoskins, who was one of my squad leaders, guys is covered in tattoos, and overall a great guy. And he locks eyes with me and said, "Sir, I'll go with you." And I don't think I have enough time to talk everything leading up to this, but like that right there made my whole military experience, was that bond, because I truly felt the bond of my soldiers, and that statement, basically asking for volunteers, and he steps up, and we go out to Korengal, and of course the attack never happened. We got home. But you think about stories in Beowulf and the Bible about David, and you do things in life that people don't think you should be able to do, or they say, "Oh, you can't do that, and you're not supposed to be here, or you'll never be successful doing this," and people put their insecurities on you and try to dissuade you from things. Rarely, and I see that happening now with this congressional run. My opponents don't think I should be here, and they don't. How's this nobody?
So let's talk about that a little bit. So what have you done since leaving the Army? Okay. Because when you talk about multitasking a little bit earlier, and how your West Point experience kind of taught you how to handle it all at once, you've gone on the track of a pretty prolific entrepreneur since leaving the Army. So what does that look like for Sam?
So Ash and I got out of the Army in 2011. I was an instructor at one of those Fort Benning schools after the deployment to Afghanistan for a couple years. And then getting out of the Army in 2011, I had the idea, and I come from a long line of like my dad's an entrepreneur, my brother does his own thing, and I wanted to get into business, and not corporate America, but owning your own business. And I had this idea of, man, in the infantry at 6 a.m., we train our platoon. We train 40 guys in physical training and I loved it. So I can do that when I get out. And so anyway, I started a gym called Van Zandt Fitness Company, and soon we got affiliated with CrossFit. And of course, we were doing CrossFit by the time I got out of the Army. It kind of got filtered into the Army. And so my wife and I, we owned CrossFit Van Zandt and CrossFit Van Zandt South. We also started a coffee company called Van Zandt Coffee, where we roast coffee beans. And we have a real estate investment company called GP Delta Investments, where we buy and develop commercial and residential property. But it's taking something, an idea, and then adding grit to it and hard work and growing it and starting something out of thin air is what we did. And just like everything else, when I started my business, I had more people come in there to tell me how it wouldn't work and how I was an idiot than actually customers. And now, we've grown and we do it. It's successful enough to where we can do it full time, and we have employees, and we're nationally recognized in the CrossFit community. And heck, I showed a clip of our gym the other day on CNN, and it's in Canton, Texas. There's 3,800 people here. That's not supposed to happen. Per capita, I think it's the most successful CrossFit gym in the world, because there's a 2 or 3% of our whole population is members, or are members of our gym.
How does that make you feel, seeing a gym that you started from nothing on CNN in a town of less than 5,000 people?
It just validates the fact that there's nothing, you can do anything you want. And I try to tell kids this too. And it's sometime probably my parents or somebody told me this. Nothing's impossible. There's just a lot of hard work in between now and then. You can do it, and still, you're never too old. You're never, whatever. It just takes grit. It takes determination, discipline, and hard work to grow anything. And nothing happens overnight. And CrossFit Van Zandt wasn't a success overnight. And there was a lot of trying, and there's still trying times with it. It's never a walk in the park. And there's so many. We're still pretty young. We're 34 years old, and there's a lot of life left to live. And people need to understand that the world is out there for the taking. And just like you were saying, that I never want to, on my deathbed, I don't want to wonder what I could have done, or things that I was interested in that I didn't pursue because of the hard work or the stress involved. So yeah, it feels great. And the company that we've started is not just a self-serving company. People change their lives with us. They lose hundreds of pounds. They gain confidence. Sometimes they leave destructive relationships because of newfound courage and confidence, and they start to live healthy. They start living life. They go from sickness to living their life and attacking life at every angle. And a weird thing happened in November. I got a call from our West Point classmate, Sam Brown, who went to West Point with us, went to Ranger School with us, and deployed to Afghanistan with us in our brigade, but he went down to South Afghanistan to the desert. And that's where he got blew up. He's a wounded warrior, and he's burnt. But he's a hero of mine. And he called me early November and said, "Sam, your congressman is retiring, and it's an open seat. And have you ever considered running for Congress?" And I said, "Well, not really. Let me think about it." And he said, "If you do it, I'll be your campaign manager, and we'll do this thing. And we need real leaders in our country." And I couldn't help but to think about the former soldiers that we went to Kunar with that are struggling with PTSD, and veteran suicide, and then the struggles of going through starting a small business with a lot of times the government creating more obstacles than they need to, and dissuading you more than they should be, motivating you to create jobs and helping you, and really the state of our country. And if we don't stand up to do something about it, who will? And, I don't want a career in politics. I'm living my dream right now with my businesses and living here in Canton. But it's almost like Sam Brown asked me to go on another patrol. And it took 2 weeks. Ashley and I were talking about it. We cried about it, prayed about it. It took 2 weeks to decide to do it. And we kept coming up with reasons, it's going to be a lot of stress, and we're going to put our businesses at risk because, politics is a very touchy subject, and half the people are going to hate us, and is it worth it? And then you think about your kids. I got a 4-year-old son named George, and I preach at CrossFit, nothing's impossible, and it just takes a lot of hard work. So I feel like I'd be the biggest hypocrite in the world if I turned down this opportunity to be a leader, to help our country, to help our veterans, to help our small business owners, and to serve again as a congressman for my home district, which Canton is right in the heart of District 5 here in Texas. So we finally decided to do it. And man, it has been a roller coaster of emotion, of learning, and of purpose. And early voting started 2 days ago, and our campaign is doing incredible considering the competition that we have and the money behind some of the other campaigns. But we can win this thing, and
I think
life has been like after the Army.
I was going to ask you why were you running, and you answered that well. But I think hearing your reasons for running for Congress, I think that resonates with a lot of people, because the challenge of that, I think that the word you mentioned, grit, a lot of this comes back to that, because what's grit? I think it's resolve and strength of character is the way I would describe that, right? The ability, the courage, the resolve to be able to keep putting one foot in front of the other despite the adversity and despite the roadblocks that you face. And the experiences that you had in the military, that you had at West Point, all of that, coming back to shared adversity, the primary fear being fear for those around you instead of fear for yourself. All of those things, I think, have kind of brought you to this point where you've got the resolve and strength of character to be able to do this and do it right, whether it's running your businesses, living your life, being a dad, being a leader and a public figure within your community, or being a congressman for the 5th District of Texas. Any of those things take grit, and I think it's pretty fair to say that you've got a little bit of that.
Yeah, I'd like to say so. And, being a real person, and, too many times, and this show's not about politics, but our country, you and I, and a lot of your listeners, I'm sure, have sacrificed and have invested so much into our country, and we have to remain the keepers, and we have to remain. We don't just quit leading when we take the uniform off. I mean, it continues, and you think about West Point, duty, honor, country. We still have to live that, and one of the reasons, I guess, West Point's free, is that for the rest of your life, you have to live duty, honor, country. And I'm doing it. And this is the best way in my opinion, and I'm the most qualified to stand up and do this for District 5, so I'm doing it. I don't care how hard it is. I don't care, the daily stress and all the nuances of being a political figure and the social media trolls that are on constant attack, but that's, nothing compared to the impact that you can have as a leader. And, anything tough or trying, everybody likes to complain about things that are happening. And they say, well, somebody do something. And everybody looks around the room for somebody to stand up. And who are those people that actually stand up and take the burden, And anyway, I feel very strongly about what we're doing. And thanks, man. Thanks for having me on this podcast.
I think that your commitment to service and continued commitment to service, as well as your success as an entrepreneur and your strength of character, you inspire me. So I'm sure that you're going to have that inspirational effect on so many more people. And I appreciate you coming on and telling a little bit about your story. And we wish you the best of luck in the congressional campaign and successes going forward. I'm sure the successes won't be small and won't be few in number.
Well, thank you, man. And if this podcast comes out before the end of the primary or whenever, folks that are interested can go to samdeen.com, and my last name is spelled Deen, and you can donate there. You can check out our story, and we have some videos and stuff, and help support our campaign. And thanks, Michael. I really appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, anybody interested in finding out about Sam's congressional run, this episode should air pretty quickly within a week or so after we record here. So if you're interested in Sam's congressional run, checking out his platform or that donate button that he has, that's Sam, SAM, Deen.com, samdeen.com. So, well, I appreciate you coming on, and it's been a great talk.
All right. Thanks, bud.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. I published this one 4 days early to put Sam's story out there prior to his primary election, but I'll be back with episode 8 on March 13th.